This is the meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, and it's for purposes of
hype has gone down now that we are seeing that, okay, we are not there yet financially. So we are trying to find out that where are the loopholes that as the department, as you do monitoring also to the Wesgro, what are the loopholes that you have identified, and maybe give us the assurance principle that are going to be in place that we can see an improvement, because usually we are used to yellow to green, and here we went from green, yellow to red with the AG report and the outcome of the Wesgro. So that will be all from me.
Thank you very much, Honorable Maseko. Honorable Marai.
Thank you, Chair. My first question, it relates to pages 51 and 53.
51.
51. Are we not doing governance anymore?
No, which one? Which? Which?
It's governance within the DDAC report.
Okay, in the department.
Yes.
But it should not be 51. It started at 1.
No,
two,
sorry.
Yeah, it started 1. The governance.
I'm looking at the SBI IDZ, sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Don't mean to give you a heart attack.
Okay. No. Okay.
On that report,
yes.
I just wanted to get a better understanding of the requirements for attending for the committee members. So how is it determined that they are necessary to be present at a committee? What is the target associated with their attendance, and are there any repercussions of them not attending? And then my second question, it doesn't relate to a specific page, but I just wanted to understand in terms of Wesgro and the audit outcomes, if we could possibly get more information with regards to the action plan, and in particular, how it aims to address the findings, what has been achieved to date, and the timelines for implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Marai. I'm going to hand over to the department, then the minister between you and the HOD will decide who's going to answer where and how. I'll hand over to
Thank you very much, Chair, and to the members for the questions. Before we sort of divide them up amongst the department and the entities, there have been quite a number of questions on Wesgro, understandably. But I think it's important to say that, it's now all hands on deck to try and assist Wesgro to ensure that the audit findings are improved for the next financial year. And so there is support from DDAT, which we'll go into more detail later, within Wesgro itself, which they can talk to, but also from Provincial Treasury side, and at every opportunity where we find an opportunity to assist and to put systems in place from the various departments and the Western Cape government to provide that support to Wesgro, it is being done, and there's obviously a lot of attention on it. So, from each of those perspectives, we could give you information, which we can do now. HOD, I don't know if you want to divide the questions up then for our department.
Yes, I'll do that. So thank you very much, Chair, and thanks, Minister. Maybe just building on what Minister has just said, I'll just ask the CFO to respond to the work that we're doing to support Wesgro, and then to also respond to the questions relating to specifically to governance, and then also to speak to the issue of whistleblower protection. And then I'll ask John and Rashid to talk to the issue of economic constraints and the SMMEs and the mitigation strategies. And then if you could also just speak, Ilsa, overall on our strategy on oversight, that would be helpful. And then give Wesgro the opportunity to talk to the issues of leadership and capacity. I think that's in order that we give that to the Chair and the CEO of Wesgro to respond to. Emana?
Okay. Thank you, HOD. Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to go in the order of the pages, and then I'll come back to the Wesgro oversight question, or at least support question. So on page 128, the issue around the fraud case, just to state that the issue of the fraud or the case doesn't relate to the department specifically. It's fraud that occurred within CSC, so the Department of the Premier, and because the actual expenditure sits with the department, the write-off for the fraud is sitting with the department, but the actual internal control deficiency sits with Department of the Premier. So within the Department of Economic Development, there was no fraud cases for the year under review. With regard to the whistleblower policy, the PFS case, Provincial Forensic Services case, does not relate to a whistleblower. It's a case that was within the department, and the disciplinary is being done within this financial year. Then I'm going to move on to page 133. There was 2 questions. The question related to the internal control unit and the internal audit, 50% internal audit follow-up action. So from the department's perspective, and it also relates to the second part of the question, we follow a combined assurance model. So from the department's perspective, internal audit had a 50% implementation. It gets handed over to the department, and the internal control unit within the department has got 100% implementation. So from a follow-up perspective, we've ensured that we've got full follow-up on all actions that was identified within the year under review. Then, with regard to the question around the combined assurance from all our assurance providers, so the department, together with the Department of the Premier, follows a combined assurance model where all our assurance providers, starting from AG, internal audit, our internal control unit, as well as our enterprise risk management unit, we together look at all the risk within the department, and we ensure that we mitigate the risk in terms of either controls that we implement or audits that we execute, or even consulting audits that we request from internal audit. We don't duplicate. Based on the model that we implement, we obviously ensure that we attain the audit that we've attained over the last 10 years. With regard to page 135, the question on the audit committee members, the member will note that Mr. Richard Roder was the chairperson from 1st January 2019 to 31st December 2021, and he attended 5 meetings. Mr. Comfort Bunting then took over from 1st January, and that's why you're only seeing the 2 meetings coming through for Mr. Bunting. So altogether, the chairperson was there for all 7 meetings. It's just 2 different chairpersons. And then I think I've covered all my questions on governance. With HOD, do you want me to take Wesgro now?
Before we go to Wesgro, I'd like John and Rashid to answer the question on the economy constraints for the SMME and support the ecosystem support.
Thank you, Chair. That was a question for Member Nkondlo. We once again come to this issue of budgets cut and a constrained parcel of money to fill our COE expenditure. And I think our challenge, why we put it as a risk, is that following the strategy process, we're going to have to move some deck chairs essentially in the organization. We know we won't be confronted with a larger budget for HR, for COE. So I think it will be a process of reorganizing and of prioritizing and deciding what it is we need to stop doing and what we need to do. And you might see a change in that organogram that we spoke about earlier, where positions look unfilled. We might have to eventually do an OD and say we no longer require this position, but our new priorities require the following position. So I think that's why we put it as a risk, because any internal OD process does come with a risk. But as I said, it's going to be a process of prioritizing, Member Nkondlo. On the second issue of the SMME support network, I mean, it actually speaks here about facilitating engagements with businesses. And what we've done, this is something that happened John has spoken already about our existing strong relationships we have with the Chambers of Commerce, and we have a very good relationships with the SME network. But just as of this year, there's actually a structure that's been established where the lion's share of about 35 small SME supporting organizations have come together, and we are organizing almost like a compact with them, where, led by the Cape Chamber of Commerce, they are bringing together the interests of businesses, identifying their binding constraints in the economy, and then working very closely with us to list those issues that make us less competitive as an economy. And the idea is that DDAT is the front end of that, but we listen to those binding constraints. They might say it's water connectivity or restrictions on informal traders, and we can then take it up with our requisite departments. It might be our Department of Infrastructure or Planning. So we have an established SME support network, as I said. John, I don't know if you want to add the one we've had before, but we've been quite deliberate about, in order to support our efforts going forward, is establishing even stronger, really pulling them together as a tight ecosystem. So, John, would you like to add?
Maybe just to add, I think in summary, what we've done is that we all know that an ecosystem is very important for SME development of a child. So the support environment is important. What we're looking at here is who are all the role players and how do you actually bring them together to plan together. So what we did, like Rashid said, in terms of the private sector, the small, the chambers, we pull them together. But I think on a government level, what we've got on a provincial level is that we've got what we call the SME Forum. It brings together all the various departments, example, public works and transport, and also DEDP, and then also human settlements that have as an interest SME development. We also then have the enterprise forum that brings together all the DFIs, and what we also then do now is and it's been relatively quite successful in the Garden Route area, where we bring together via the district model those various support organizations together. For example, we've got a compact with, I think it was Garden Route, and then also with CEDA and ourselves, where we look at how do we support that ecosystem on that side. What we've done is, I'll just try to find out where that letter is. We've spoken with the DSBD, and way back that time, we were involved in part of that time when there was DTI. We had an interprovincial forum where that time DTI pulled together the provinces. So we touting for that again, so that on a provincial and national level, we've got everyone together, because the DSBD's plan for SMME certainly calls for that. And we've also recently concluded an MOU with the DSBD that will firm up this or mitigate this risk that you pointed out. Thank you.
Ilza, can you go with Ilza before we go to Wesgro? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just with regards to, in terms of the oversight, so the department's role in terms of entity oversight, specifically with regards to Wesgro, that is in relation to two parts. So we have oversight over their performance. So once a year, we start that process off in terms of looking at a business plan, which starts drafting plans for the next financial year in terms of budgets, targets, etc. Once that's signed off, we conclude an agreement which is called a transfer payment agreement with the entity, which governs the relationship between the department and the entity. With regards to the governance, the risks, etc., that sits with the board, who they are the what is the right word? The accounting authority. So just like we have an accounting officer in the department, the accounting authority of the entity is the Wesgro board, and they have to play that particular role. The Western Cape government has as a major shareholder, we have a board seat. So there's I think it's the CFO from Department of Health. He is the nominated official from Western Cape government. He represents the not just the department, but the Western Cape government on the Wesgro board. There are 10 seats, of which there are also non-executive positions as well. And then, or ex officio is the right term. So we've got different targets, and our relationship in terms of oversight is managed through the transfer payment agreement. So that is in terms of your quarterly reports, your QPR evidence, against your performance targets, like we were talking about earlier in terms of how many investments do you land, and the evidence, etc., which goes with that. We've got different mechanisms in place in terms of how we do oversight over the entity, in terms of saying, is your spending on track? are you achieving the targets as you need to? The mechanisms we use for that is in terms of looking at the expenditure reports, the performance reports that we get, as well as the board, as well as the minister, as the executive authority, which we get quarterly. And then in terms of what you're referring to with regards to red flags, which would come up, that's the issues that's raised with the board as the accounting authority. So we have to look at that from an oversight in terms of is the entity performing? Because we can't do an audit again. That's the responsibility as they're a separate legal entity. So that's when we engage. And similarly to what HOD and our CFO alluded to, in terms of the PFMA, it's quite strict in terms of who's supposed to do what and what is the requirements. And specifically with regards to entity oversight, Provincial Treasury is currently doing a process in terms of developing public entity oversight, a framework for the province in terms of looking at all of our entities and sharpening where we can. It's always a process which we try and improve on. I know we've made numerous changes over the last 4 years in terms of the mechanism that we have as the department with the entity in terms of the transfer payment agreement to put additional belts and braces in place where you can. But as I said, it's very much in terms of their performance as an entity, which is what we have to align to. But in terms of the oversight from a governance perspective, that really sits with the board as the accounting accounting authority. Thank you.
Chair.
Okay, all right, yes.
Yeah, Chair, if I could just kind of pick up where Ilse left off. So I'm chair of the board. I can assure the chair and the committee there is a very effective governance procedure in place from the board. There is a very effective internal audit team, and there is an internal audit committee which meets and is highly effective. I just want to contextualise I accept we've dropped the ball. I accept we shouldn't have a qualified report, but I just want to contextualise for the committee how this arose. And if I draw your attention to page 96 of the Wesgro board paper, it says the entity did not adequately review the useful lives of property, plant and equipment at each reporting date as required. So what actually happened was that the useful life of some 1,400 items of office equipment and computer equipment, there is a requirement to look at the useful life and to restate the useful life. Now, it was raised the previous year. In fact, what Wesgro did was it corrected going forward. There is some debate within the accounting profession about whether you have to correct retrospectively and going forward, and with the sort of remote working confusion, the correction was not done in time, and that is what gave rise to it. It is less than 1 million rand. It is not fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and it's not fraud. It relates to an accounting technicality that is the cause of this. I'm not belittling it. There are also some internal control weaknesses, which is quite normal for a complex business like Wesgro, and it is further complicated trying to operate remotely during COVID. So I think I don't want to underestimate the requirement and the need and the recognition that we must achieve the highest standards which are achieved nationally and provincially. But I think just to contextualise, this is an accounting technicality which gave rise to the qualification, and it has been corrected and will be corrected. The report also refers to certain internal control deficiencies which would not have led to a qualification. The qualification came on this accounting technicality, and we are in the process of thoroughly looking into and cleaning up ship. And I'm going to hand over to the Chief Executive, who will respond to the questions of what measures are being taken. But the qualification itself has already been corrected. It's a spreadsheet. It's been corrected, but it wasn't done in time in the time frame, and that's what led to the qualifications. I don't want to leave people with the impression that there's a sort of whole-scale weakness within this organisation. It's specifically related to that isolated accounting issue. But I'm going to hand over to the CEO, who will talk about the measures we're taking to correct the internal control deficiencies.
Sorry, before we may continue, which board are you from? Are you the chairperson?
I'm the chair of the Wesgro board.
Or of the board, not
of the board of
audit
Wesgro,
committee,
which is the accounting, have the accounting officer and accounting responsibility.
Confused now because we've just was with the chairperson of the audit committee. No, that's fine. I got that confused. But you are saying the technicality adjustment because you are speaking very soft, and then also I just want to make sure that I understand.
Yes.
You were saying that the technicality that led to the finding has been corrected.
Correct.
But that was not reported as such in our, but we'll deal with that when we deal with E of the report. Yeah, because then I suppose other members that are listening will deal with that when we're dealing with E.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just wanted to make sure because I was confused whether it's a chairperson of the audit committee or of the board.
Apologies,
now I
should
understand you are the chairperson of the board. No, thank you very much. But we'll deal with that when we deal with E of the report. But it's fine. Thanks for that explanation.
Chair, so I'm going to deal with what we've put in place as was requested by the honourable member.
Sorry, your position?
I'm Renald Stander. I'm the CEO of Wesgro.
Okay.
Yeah. Chair, so I think the board has been appraised of some of the changes that happened at Wesgro. So the CEO change, chairman of the board change, audit committee change, and of course a new CEO. I do want to assure the board that the entity, if it's not stabilized, it's definitely stabilizing. And we're already on the path to performing. So I'd like to just give the committee the assurance and some of the work that we've already done to try and correct some of the issues. So the EXCO has now been stabilized. We've finalized the EXCO structure. We have reviewed and reconfirmed the strategy. When we started the financial year, the investment promotion team was, I think, fairly unstable. We've managed to ensure that the investment promotion and facilitation team is fully staffed and fully functional. We've introduced quite a couple of culture interventions, including working with the culture interventions relate to the engagement of staff, but also a visible and competent EXCO. So there's a lot of EXCO feet on the ground and working with the team. Given that context, we've also drafted a very detailed turnaround plan, which takes into account all of the items listed in the management account by the Auditor General, and it also includes all of the items that have been listed by the internal auditors. Just to give you a sense of the urgency and the gravity with which we view the situation, the Audit and Risk Committee has been meeting monthly to review the work that has been performed by the team. And the EXCO has been meeting weekly so that we can actually make sure that we're dealing with all of the issues. We are undergoing a full policy review, and the focus has been on financial management, supply chain, assets, and travel. And at the same time as reviewing the policies, we've also looked at how we can simplify the processes to ensure some level of single point accountability. With respect to the structure, the focus is on having the right people in the right place. We have supplemented the finance team, not sufficiently and not fast enough. I would have liked to have done that faster. We are getting exceptional support, which we gratefully accept. From the Auditor General's office, from the Accountant General in the province, and particularly from DDAT. And I really just want to say thank you to all of the parties involved. I want to give some progress in relation to where we are on each of the key issues. With respect to the asset restatement, we are working towards, with the support of DDAT, to ensure that our 6 monthly financials have the corrected asset restatement in it. It's something that we're working towards. We also have, with DDAT's support, we have also applied the irregular expenditure process framework,
and we are at the stage of consequence management. As soon as we've worked through the reports and we know what needs to be done, we will do the necessary consequence management, and whatever changes are required to ensure that this situation does not reoccur. With respect to the supply chain process, it was really about not following our own processes. We have now ensured that despite that, we have fully reviewed the supply chain policy. We finalized the SOPs, and currently that is with the Audit and Risk Committee and with DDAT just to review for completeness. And then with respect, I think the committee knows that our CFO resigned just towards the end of the audit, and we are in the process now of finalizing the process for the new CFO. Again, I am being supported by the CFO of DDAT in the interview process. We are optimistic that we will be able to present 3 strong candidates to the Audit and Risk Committee of the board. I just want to leave it there for now.
Saldana? We still have Saldana.
Okay, thank you, committee. So I'm Kashifa Bukas. Sorry, I'm the CEO of Freeport Saldana. So on member Nkondlo's question on risks. So risks is covered, and JC will add in our corporate plan quite extensively. But in the annual report under our situational analysis under Part B, there's quite a discussion on the material risks that the company faces in the changing context of the economy nationally and internationally. And then also it's also highlighted in the forwards by myself and the chair. On page 57, the question on our CSR initiatives, quite right, we do quite a lot in that regard. So to maybe give some insight into that, so for the year under review, we trained 193 people on our skills programs. It's a lot less than what we are used to, but there have been quite a lot of delays in administering the funding from the CETAs and adjustments that needed to be done due to COVID, really, and the opening and closing of some of the service providers over the last few years due to the shutdown of ArcelorMittal as well has had a knock-on effect on the availability of service providers. And then also one key and a growing partnership that has been established with the Western Cape Education Department is in our high school program. So since 2020, just after COVID started, we've been running a mathematics practice training program with maths teachers in the secondary schools, and the University of Stellenbosch and Wits University through the Link Center provide that training to the mathematics teacher to enhance their skills in teaching maths using digital skills, which is obviously digital tools, which is quite pertinent for the online environment. And 14 teachers graduated in March 2022, and then following on from that and looking at the success of the program and the interest from the teachers to continue with it. Now, past the year under the reporting, we've secured a funding from the Western Cape Education Department for an expansion of that program as well as additional programs. So that's work that's continuing. So that's 3. And then also our SMME CoLab, which is operational, which gives free data and printer, Wi-Fi access and printing access and meeting rooms access to SMMEs. That averages about between 80 and 90 SMMEs per month that come in and use the facilities for their business operations. So that's a picture of our CSR. On the question, I don't remember on the requirements, I'll ask Solly for board attendance and so forth. I'll ask, but before I hand over to Solly, JC, would you like to add on the risks?
Does one work?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Very quickly, my name is JC Stackman. I'm acting Chair of the Board. Member Nkondlo, as Kasi Fazi indicated, normally the full risk thing is in the corporate plan for the year. But what we've done in that particular section under the corporate governance is just refer to that corporate management system. But on the forward, as Kasi Fazi indicated, pages 8 to 13, in particular under challenges on page 9, they're all the main risks that we discussed previously. And then also in the situation analysis on pages 35, 37, which Kasi Fazi alluded to. And then also under stakeholder management, pages 43 to 44. And then under the Audit IT Committee Chair, there's also a reference to that gentleman sitting there looking very satisfied with himself. And then on page 73, on the audit report on internal controls, there's also certification from the Auditor General in terms of the risk management system that it's adequate. I hope that helps. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm Solly Martinez. I'm the company secretary for Freeport Saldana. Member Murray, the questions that you've posed on page 51, I think to start off, it's important just to note that both our board of directors as well as the various committees, they operate in terms of an approved terms of reference, which regulates the operations of the board as well as of the committees. In that is also regulation of attendance of meetings, as well as the requisite quorum for proceeding with a meeting. On the list, the detail that's been provided on page 51, that lists the board attendance for directors for the year under review. In terms of the terms of reference, the board meets quarterly. For those members that have not attended the 4 prescribed meetings, the reasons for the non-attendance are for the member that represents the DTIC on the board. That particular director resigned in January, hence the attendance of only 2 meetings. The other members that had less than the 4 meetings tendered formal apologies. That was noted by the board for their non-attendance. In terms of monitoring the attendance and the consequence management of non-attendance, the terms of reference allows for members to be removed if they miss 3 or more meetings without formal apology, but it also allows for other grounds of removal of directors from the board of directors. But these are monitored via the office of myself, the company secretary, as well as the board secretary, and we report regularly on the attendance of members. If there are issues with regards to attendance, and normally the chairperson would act and intervene and then speak to the particular member just to find out the reasons for the non-attendance. I hope I have addressed the questions. Thank you.
The answers, Chair.
Thank you very much, HOD. Do you have follow-ups, honorable members, or do you want us to go straight to E? Okay, follow-ups. Honorable Maseko and Honorable Keko, Honorable Nkondlo.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I just want to find out from and thanks from the board of Wesgro for the response, but I just want to find out from him because Wesgro have regressed since the 2019, 2020. And it's more about the non-compliance. And that non-compliance goes with the predetermined objectives. Now, with the explanation you are giving, we take that we do understand. What we don't understand is the financial principles that have to be adhered to, and then is the one that is making the audit outcome to regress from being green to red to yellow and red. So if we have to get the explanation from the chair, it will be what is it that went wrong and the assurance to that. Because if we have a response of but, it's not going to give us also the assurance of really you identify what are the shortcomings and what needs to be done to correct that. I think that's the only concern that I have for the Wesgro from the chairperson, that the response that you gave was sort of condoning a certain percentage to be acceptable to what we are seeing in front of us as the Public Accounts Committee. Whereas from the board chair, as an accounting officer, we feel that you have to give us the scope of the assurance to correct that, because expectations from us as the standing committee is to make sure that that non-compliance have to be eradicated, to make sure we are at the road to make sure that at least it becomes some other challenges that are maybe the moving targets, not the financial principle that really has to give you the scope that we are doing the right thing. And I'm not taking away the creation of the jobs, and that it's only this part of non-compliance, and also making sure as a board member the stability within the Wesgro, that what is it that needs to happen, you being the chair of the SA accounting officer to that entity. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Before we come to the answer, let's just give the other honorable members, Honorable Kego and Honorable Nkon.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think on the issue of Wesgro and the response we receive in terms of the stability that is being tried to be put in place there. As much as Honorable Masego says that the answer is satisfactory, it's not. Actually, it's not. There is instability there. And that should be the kind of message you are getting from us. There is instability there and we are concerned. There were like horror stories we received yesterday as SCOPA of reasons why people could not be able to deliver a service. And a very big company would refer to us to load shedding and say we could not be able to deliver sanitary towels and condoms and everything because of load shedding, which is a very vague response to a committee of this kind. We want to hear the actual challenges that have. We had a situation here where your audit committee could not be able to give us a report. And it is cited on the issue of instability. And then now come Wesgro here and cite a very beautiful picture of stability that is there. Now, which confuses us. And then what we expected that the department maybe would be able to give us the measures that the department is putting to bring stability to that entity. We just come from COVID, where there were serious challenges of financial backdrop from our people. So we're expecting an economic recovery plan that would be executed by government. And Wesgro is one of the key entities that should rescue our economy in this regard. So I don't think Wesgro would have any response in that regard as to what exactly is going to be done to rescue the situation there. Because we cannot at this juncture come and get a verbal report and excuses of people who resigned from management and all that. The audit committee is still there. Why don't we have a report? And then the CEO is claiming that there were regular interactions between the audit committee and the management of Wesgro. Then if that is the situation, why don't we have the report so that we would know what internal controls are you putting in place? So that's a question now. No, I can see Wesgro cannot be able to assist us with anything. We're asking the department, what is it that you are doing to rescue us from that situation?
Maybe just also clarify more, just to clarify more what Honorable Kego is the picture that he's trying to paint is that when we met with the Audit Committee and Auditor General. We normally receive reports from the Auditor General. We received one for the department, we received one for IDZ, we received one for Atlantis, and we also received one for, what is the fourth one? A Wesgro from the AG. Then we must get Audit Committee reports of all 4, but we only received 3. We did not receive a written report from Wesgro. And the reason that were cited were administrative reason, because the administration is busy, they are trying to sort out challenges there and so on and so on, so which we understand. But now the CEO and the chairperson of the board, they said, no, everything is fine. There should not be a problem. So if everything was fine, we could have at least have the 4-page or 3-page written report. We could have had that. Now, that's why I just wanted to amplify what, so that it can be clearer when you are giving responses, so that, just wanted to amplify Honorable Qego's question so that it can be clearer. And again, we are not here trying to use one against each other. We are just trying to get to the bottom of the cause of the problem so that we can resolve it. Honorable Nkondlo.
No, thank you, Chair. Taking from what you have said, Chair, I think perhaps the department must then tell us, with all the process response the department has provided on how they play their oversight over this entity called Wesgro. Are you satisfied with such? If then the outcome of what you are, by legislation, you are supposed to oversight is read. I think that was the point that we're trying to make. And we are raising this in context that if you look at the audit opinion, and we are not there, I'm making reference, Chair, because we're dealing with governance, that this started in 2019, 2020, 2021. So our understanding of oversight is that in such a situation, the responsibility of the custodian of this entity is to ensure these things, they happen. Yes, having meetings, discussing, agreeing on this, sitting in the board is not enough if then this is the situation. And I think the Chair is correct that the 2 presentation from the board chair and the CEO and the internal audit chairperson actually gives a different picture. And if one follows, and I'm sure we are going to get there, I don't want to sort of put what's the first one? Is it the horse or the cart? That thing left. Yeah, that one. So I do not want to do that, but I'm just wanting to present the point of why we are concerned, because I think the Chair said the matter of material misstatements, whilst he does not want to downplay it, but it is a technical issue. And if you consider what is in that report, that is not the only issue. There are challenges in this particular annual report as it relates to PDOs, as it relates to procurement and contract management, things that are repeating. So that is the question, and we are asking the department, because we believe that the last line of defense for, as you said, the performance of this particular department and its compliance is in the department. So that is why I'm asking, are you satisfied with those process-related sort of explanations you were providing? But also, Chair, I'm concerned because part of the response says, I think Treasury is engaging in developing a framework. And I want to ask, perhaps both the Minister and the HOD can explain. What is the difference in Wesgro as an entity of the state versus other entities of the state? Because you were speaking here, you've got relationship with the likes of Transnet. So this particular area of shareholder oversight is not an area that is unique to the Western Cape. There are prescripts. The fact that even Wesgro itself derives its mandate from PFMA. So if you are going to say to me now at this point, we're looking at a framework through provincial treasury as if shareholder oversight as a function is something that is not known. It's known. I mean, state-owned entities are abound in the country. Actually, I remember in one year, there was a commission led by Ms. Pierre, you know, to review state-owned entities across. So what is it that through this department and the treasury is new that must be learned to try and improve shareholder oversight? And my questions are actually on the basis of a very basic understanding of what shareholder oversight is about. That when all is said and done, the ball ends there by the department. That is why even when there were issues of some of the board members resigning, the former minister had to intervene, including when there are board appointments. We as parliament, we must get involved. So I'm trying to understand what is this thing that it's like when we come here, you've got an arm's length kind of a relationship as the department with an entity, a very important entity in the economic development of this department. And I'm saying that's the impression I got from the response that you gave me. And actually, the chairperson of the internal audit already indicated he is also exiting, and I'm not sure whether it's because his contract is ending, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what the impression I have as a person sitting on this side is like when the CEO left, resigned, and we're told that also the CFO actually has resigned. So it's like things just fall apart, you know? So where are the internal controls? Because organizations and institutions are not about persons. When persons leave, the institution still remains because the institution has got systems. And actually, part of what the Auditor General indicates in their audit opinion is that since 2019, the internal control deficiencies have been an issue in Wesgro. And that is why I'm asking, is the department sleeping on duty in as far as its shareholder oversight is concerned? And my last one on this one, Chair, is that if you check page 70, please help me understand in page 70 of Wesgro. Yeah, page 70 of Wesgro. In the board charter composition of the board, I think is the meetings. Help me understand how the distribution of work happens amongst the board members. Because here you have the chairperson who in here would have had, I think in other, attended about 29 meetings with, I think with also the CEO, 37 meetings. And then the others vary between 2, 5, and 8, if maybe you can help me understand. And also just explain to me that Mr. John Copeland, whom if you look at the board directorships that are listed under his name, it actually takes about 2 to 3 pages just for himself. And his board attendance is 5 with other 2. And I'm saying, is it because in the space there is a very limited pool that Wesgro must draw from in trying to get, you know, the necessary expertise or people that would assist and support it in as far as its governance is concerned? Because when you look at such a picture, it is really worrying, not because there's something illegal in what Mr. John Copeland has done. There's nothing illegal. But it then talks about his availability to the work, if indeed he's so much overstretched according to what is here. Thank you, Chair.
I was about to say you must round up. Let's get a response.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's important to recognise the two different timelines. So the one is then the report under review, and then what is being described as the kind of way forward and the work that's being done to address the issues that arise from the reports here. So yes, Honourable Tejo, there was instability within Wesgro. As we know, the CEO resigned, there was an acting CEO, then a new CEO was appointed, the chair of the board passed away. So there was quite a bit of instability then. But moving forward, the CEO has been at pains to describe how that organisation is now stabilising, all the appointments that have been made, and the work that's being done forward-looking to make sure that next year we're having a totally different conversation in this committee. Also, just then to note on the board, since this we've had some really important appointments to the board where we have a person that originates from the Auditor General who will be able to assist the board, as well as a very strong appointment from within the provincial government with very strong financial management experience. So in that respect, we're trying to help the board to succeed as far as possible, again, so that next year we're having a very different type of conversation. So just to set that out, I think then we can respond to the rest of the questions.
Thank you very much, Minister. Let me also, from the very outset, accept that we have not been very aggressive in being able to read the signs. Leadership change is very disruptive. Leadership change brings instability in the organization. And I think as a department, yes, we should have read the signs and reacted a lot quicker. But what I'd like to say is that the department, through our Chief Financial Officer, has put in place a process to strengthen the internal controls. And I would like her just to speak to that intervention and then ask then the Wesgro board to answer to the more specific questions that were asked. So if you don't mind, CFO.
Thank you, HOD. Thank you, Chair. So from our side, we were approached, I think, towards the end of September, October, and the way we are looking at implementing controls, implementing an entire turnaround strategy is that we're looking at the management report. And I think the members are very correct. It's not only around the assets, there's a lot of issues. There's AOPI issues, there's supply chain management issues. So there's a lot of issues across the Wesgro financial management area. So the first thing that we're doing is we are seconding our supply chain manager for 3 months to Wesgro to firstly ensure that the SAM policies are all being reviewed, but more importantly, that staff is being trained within that area. The second thing that we are doing, which I think is very important, and it's really, if it works out, I think it's really going to make a lot of changes in terms of how Wesgro's audit outcome will look. We are auditing the 6 months financial statements with a specific focus on the areas of irregularities, the assets, and then also issues such as revenue and the other issues that's coming through in the management report. Then we are focusing on the irregular expenditure. I think the members will be aware there was quite a significant amount of irregular expenditure that's been identified, and the CEO spoke to those things. We've basically completed our investigation around the irregular expenditure. It's now about how consequence management and corrective action needs to be taken. Then in terms of the audit of performance information, it's again very important area, and we are looking at the current system that Wesgro is implementing around AOPI, and then looking at how we can change or assist them in terms of putting in the necessary controls for the audit of performance information. I think it's a very critical area because it does relate to then the performance of the entity. So from our side, it's a full-on turnaround strategy. It's hands-on support because that's the only way we're going to be able to actually turn that organization around in terms of financial management, and we are able to then hopefully achieve a better audit outcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I couldn't actually improve on what has just been said. That is exactly the position. There was instability. That instability is being addressed, and that we've got a sort of very close monitoring of that happening. So I wouldn't add to that. Just picking up the specific question in relation to the board meetings, I think we've explained the CEO resigned in June. A lot of the 29 meetings that Mike Spicer was involved in the resignation of the CEO and then the subsequent recruitment of the new. So a lot of those meetings were interactions with which were a consequence of the resignation and the appointment or the recruitment appointment of new CEO. Specifically with regard to John Copeland, John attended 5 board meetings. He wasn't a member of either of the Audit and Risk or the HRRC meeting, and he has subsequently resigned from the Wesgro board because of the commitments that he clearly has, as you can see from the 3 pages of directorships that he has. Thank you.
Okay. You fine from your side. Now, what I want us to do now, I want us to move to section E of the report. Of the reports. Plural in English got an S at the end. So, the section E of the report of all the departments, starting with the department as well as its entity, I would like to get an indication of members who want to ask. Honorable Kego. Honorable Kego is indicated. You can start.
Thanks, sir. Before I continue, sir, I would want to know, like, we ask all the questions at once.
Yes,
because I've got a long list.
Section C of the reports.
Section E.
Section E of the reports. So not of the report. Like I said, plurals.
All of them at once.
Plurals got an S in English at the end. So
I'm fine with that, Chairman. No.
You just, as long as you indicate we are E, either of the department, we are E of the Saldana, of so on.
Okay, thanks, sir. No, I think on that note, I will take the department only, and then my fellow colleagues will definitely
share the others.
We will share with follow-ups even on the on the entities. On page 182, Chair, of the department, if we would have an explanation in terms of the material impairments investments amounting to more than 24.3 million, which talks to investment. It's not a query, but it's just a matter of clarity. Because if we would have an understanding, there is nothing wrong with investment, but it's just a matter of if we would understand what is it invested on, so that we don't unfairly critique you, all to find out you are boosting our economy. And then also on page 188, under transfers and subsidies, of which there is a number of NGOs that these monies are being transferred to. And then similarly, the household that receive transfers and subsidies from the department, and then if we would just get that for what purpose. And then on page 200, regarding program 1, which is the administration, the department says there is an underspending that was as a result of delayed implementation of the We Mean Business communication campaign. We would want just to understand what could the delay have been that is causing underspending. This is also maybe because of the horror stories that we hear when we are here. Because sometimes when you go to the actual reasoning behind underspending and the delays and everything, you would get that they are not actually reasons. And then also on program 4, there is a director that was delayed to have been appointed in terms of consumer protector, which also resulted in the underspending. Then, if we can be able to get clarity that, because some of the you've stated here that instability sometimes result in the issue of failure of service delivery, but we don't want to unfairly critique you without understanding the circumstances we are operating from. And then, as well as on page 222, regarding the debts written off, you know, this one would want a clear clarity. There is a 62,000 rand that is clear, is written off of a salary overpayment irrecoverable. Which means the person is still on the payroll, on the roll. So, and the person has been paid, or the different people have been paid such money, and yet it's still irrecoverable. So if we can have an understanding as to how do you have somebody within your administration, and yet it's a, and then the issue of on page 228 regarding the Western Cape Funding Fair project, some of the service providers that manage and arrange logistical requirements ended up returning the portion of the money that was required by the department since the event was cancelled. And then want to understand what exactly happened there. And then the Pick and Pay Township Revitalization Program, those people, did they return themselves the money? Also, the same question goes to the Township Revitalization project regarding two beneficiaries who could not produce evidence of purchasing machinery and equipment, which is an issue that we want to pose the same kind of, if these beneficiaries were paid in cash, which result in people receiving the money and they later they are not able to give the, and then what type of constraints that or measures we have in place to ensure that such situations we don't experience going forward. Then on page 229, take note of the investments that were made to the Atlantis Special Economic Zone Limited and the Cape Town International Convention Center Limited. The question then is that how stable is the economy there, or the generation of profit there? And then on page 237, regarding the irregular expenditure there at the bottom of the page, how much was this payment made to the beneficiary that is now subject of condonation? Because we don't want just to condone any other thing. So we just say there is a, and then regarding page 238, the case relating to fraudulent disbursement of salaries. This is still under the employee, is this person still under the employee? And then what are the consequences? Because you talked about consequence management there earlier on. On page 242, regarding movable assets written off, what happened to the camera? Because there's a camera and two laptops that are also there, but they are not mentioned. That why are they being written off? On page 246, there are certain municipalities that receive grants, and then there are certain municipalities that were not given grants. Just want to understand the rationale behind that in terms of economic recovery that the department is championing. And then I pose the same question on page 248 regarding the conditional grants that were paid to different municipalities. If we can get clarity that the criteria thereof. Thank you very much.
No, I'm very convinced, Honorable Member, you've also asked those questions for other members as well. That you might have covered other members. Honorable Maseko, who else? Honorable Ngondlo, Honorable Van der Steesen, Honorable Marie. Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I think I agree with you. He really did indeed. Maybe from the Atlantis, in page 115. I just want to get the clarity just for us to have an understanding of the general expenses. I see there is amount of the community stakeholder network, community skills development, the consulting and professional fees, and the last one, it will be the supplier development program. So if we can have maybe the clarity of how do you separate that, and then the value to it, to the Atlantis, why is that important, and especially also on I saw the consulting and professional fees versus the supplier development program. If maybe I can have a clarity of why that is important to you. I think for me that will be the only thing. Member Kleko already took the responsibility to make sure, Chair, that your patience is in order. Thanks, Chair.
We can only amplify on some of the questions he has raised. Honorable Nkondlo.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. I'll take leadership from the fight. But in as far as the department is concerned, I can't ask more. I just want to ask on page 128 of Wesgro, if they can just explain. I see in the employee-related costs, 21, section 21, I think, according to this, there are about 4 resignations. And I think there in the asterisk, there's an explanation of resignation effective and acting allowance 124, another one 217. Can you just explain what this is? To whom was these acting allowances paid? If any, you would explain. The other one, Chair, I'm interested to know in page 129, I see from the previous financial year to the one that we're dealing with, that consulting fees almost doubled. If you can just give an indication, what would be these consulting fees that Wesgro had to pay in this, including the recruitment costs? Because it is in the same sort of report, one gets an impression that actually people have been packing their bags, and leaving, and during this financial year, but for whatever reason, the recruitment costs are actually, I can't even say 200%, they've skyrocketed. If you look at the amount before, I think in 2021 and 2022, if you can just help me to understand that. My last one, Chair, I just wanted to understand the war room operations, or war room ops. I think that's what it's how it's raised actually in the annexure. I just need to understand, is it the war room that is supposed to be driven by the Premier's office? And if so, what does Wesgro have to do with, is Wesgro hosting? Maybe you can just explain to me what that is. I just see some things, I think in the last pages. Final, I think is in the admin expenses, page 26, 130. If you can just explain to me in terms of the grant refund, is this money that you are returning as a grant, paying, refunding it back to who? If you can just explain that to me. Yeah, and what is the meaning of the fees for services board members? Thank you.
Honorable Van der Westhuizen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question is regarding the annual report of the department itself, and it's more out of interest than of significance in terms of the numbers involved. On page 227, there's mention of recoverable expenditure, and I'm particularly interested in one of the 4 cases relating to government vehicles. Whether that, well, let me not speculate. If you could just explain that, please. Then also 18 cases relating to lost theft of state assets, and 1 case relating to a fraudulent salary. I think the fraudulent salary is probably the same that's been dealt with earlier today. And then down a little bit down on that page, the last table, also again the issue of a GG vehicle, but there it refers to 53 cases. So perhaps if we could just get some clarity as to that, because it's not something which I've really picked up on all the other annual reports. And then in terms of the next page, 228, the Western Cape Funding Fair project, there an amount of 1.4 million is mentioned, and then there's the beautiful explanation below that. But the question that I have is just, is the 1.4 the amount that we expect to receive, because, under the heading other receivables, or what is the full amount paid to the contractor? Obviously then what would be what is called a reasonable management fee that this contractor was allowed to keep? Thank you very much.
Honorable Maseko.
Back to me again. Okay, the last one, since you are generous, Chair, it will be for Saldana IDZ. On the maths program for the teachers, I just want to find out the output, the end users, which are the kids. How do you sort of check if there is value for your money for the recipients of their training? That's all from me, Chair.
Thank you. I just, Honorable Taibo asked a lot of questions. I just want to just add on some of 1 or 2 questions he has asked, and then I just got another question for Wesgro, on Wesgro. See, this, of course, while relating to Pick n Pay, but just to add on what Honorable Kago has asked on the Pick n Pay project. The Pick n Pay project, whilst it's a noble idea, but it looks like it's more of it might end up perpetuating poverty than eradicating poverty. The problem sometimes with poverty is not falling from the sky, is man-made. We make people sometimes to be poor. And one of those instances, I think it's the case in point, you've got a person where the idea he wants to get involved in business, then Pick n Pay put them into this problem. Now, I just wanted to ask, in terms of this, is there no way that the department, if a person says he wants to get involved in spaza shops or whatever, why don't you assist that individual? Why do you have to go via an already established monopoly capital conglomerate? Please, I use the word advisedly, not because I believe in perfect competition. So now anything that's got the features of monopoly, I got a problem with it. But why don't we identify any individual who's got the potential, give the money to that individual, of course, monitor that person, but obviously, now we ended up having a situation whereby this person is having a debt of more than 300,000. Now, there is no way a person in Kaelicha who's got the debt of 300,000 that is, we're just pushing that person to complete poverty. In other words, we are now end up being responsible for making that person poor. So I just want to check is there no way that the department can fund these people directly rather than going via a conduit on that. I just wanted also the other question on Wesgro. I think it's got to do with irregular expenditure. Now, if I think it's on page 135, the list of irregular expenditures there, it's just the way, unless there might be other explanation, but the way they have been put and explained there, it just, because even when we had the meeting with the Auditor General and Audit Committee, it was mentioned that there were some instances where caution was made that, look, stop, don't do this thing. But there were instances whereby, in some instances, they stopped, but in other instances, there was just a repeated occurrence or reoccurrence of those things. But if you look at those irregular, for example, 2 awards with a value of 167,000 were procured without inviting at least the minimum prescribed number of written price quotation from prospective suppliers. The next one, it says 3 contractors to the value of 1.4 million were procured from international suppliers whose tax matters has not been declared by the South African Revenue Services to be in order. Now, I must say, you might know that we are meeting a lot of other departments, and most of them are actually trying very hard to be compliant, but I haven't come across any instance of this nature. Maybe some explanation, there might be explanation you might have, but it will be interesting for me just to hear what might have been the cause of all of these things. I don't want to read all of them because they are self-explanatory, really. I don't want to sound repetitive. I think those were just my 2 areas of concern.
It's got a list. But what I suggest we deal with all the financial ones directly, and then all the functional ones we'll then send them to the subject matter experts. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, HRD. I'm going to again just follow the page numbers. So starting with page 182, with regard to the question around CTICC, it's an investment in terms of CTICC, and I think the COVID period has been particularly difficult on the convention centres with tourism slowing down, the convention centre forward booking being less than what it was before. So the impairment that we are seeing there is impairment as a result of the slowdown in terms of tourism and the CTICC then suffering losses. But maybe to also report some positive news, just I think yesterday we received CTICC's financial statements as at the end of June 2022, and the impairment has been totally reversed. So the next set of financials should show a reversal of the impairment. Then with regard to page 188, the issue around the transfers to non-profit institution, the detail in terms of the transfers to non-profit institution is on Annexure 1D on page 252. But just to assure the member that the process that we follow in terms of all the transfer payments is that we follow an open call for proposals, obviously with the exception of our public entities, but specifically where we have transfers to our non-profit and corporations and public enterprises. We follow a call for proposals. So let's say, for example, it's the Tourism Development Fund. We will then advertise for businesses to apply for possible funding in terms of the Tourism Development Fund. These businesses will apply against the set criteria. We have a governance structure that firstly starts with looking at the evaluation committee in terms of compliance, so looking at whether there's certain compliance requirements that needs to be met. Those shortlisted beneficiaries are then sent to the PAC, the adjudication committee, that will look at those criteria and then match the beneficiaries against those criteria. So very similar to the question around the transfer payments to municipalities. With the transfer payments to municipalities, we follow the same process, and that's specifically related to our booster fund as well as our MER fund, where we also had an open call for proposals. Municipalities were asked to respond in terms of the criteria, and where they've managed to get through both the PEC and PAC, we would then grant funding. So obviously the department doesn't have enough money to grant funding to all our applicants, but we would grant based on the highest percentage in terms of the criteria and whether they've made it specifically through our PEC, our evaluation committee. Then with regard to page 222, in terms of the debts written off. So the debts that are written off in accordance to the debt policy. For our department, it mainly related to staff debt, so either through salary overpayments. So salary administration, as I think I explained previously, sits with our CSC unit, and in most cases it sometimes becomes it's too late for us to inform them to actually withdraw a salary or stop a salary if a staff member resigns. So in cases like that, we either, if there's enough time, we try and stop the salary. If we're not able to stop it, we then institute a debt against the staff member that has resigned. We go through a policy, we go through a process attached to our policy, which includes the state attorney, and only on recommendation of the state attorney do we actually write that debt off. So it's not an automatic process, there's letters, debt recovery that we try and do before we actually move in terms of that. But if we find it's too expensive to actually follow a debt recovery process, we then would write off the debt. With regard to the question around the funding fee, the full contract was for 1,443. 75,000 of that was written off as management fee, and that's mainly because the event was supposed to be held in April, May, and COVID hit us in March. So based on the service provider that was responsible for this event, he already incurred significant management costs in terms of getting the event coordinator, the venue, caterers, etc., etc. So again, we had to pay off the management fee, which would then be a loss on our side. Then with regard to the irregular expenditure. So in terms of the irregular expenditure, the 1469 is made up of two cases. Case one relates to a commitment that was made to a beneficiary. At this point, we are instituting consequence management in terms of the staff member that's responsible in that area. The second one relates to an AG finding around 3 quotes for 29,000. Both of these areas have not resulted in any financial losses to the department. Area 1 will result in disciplinary against an official in terms of consequence management. And then page 238, this question has been coming up all day around the salary. So the issue around the salary overpayment, it occurred in CSC. So the control deficiency was on the Department of the Premier side. They render a service to us, but because we carry the expenditure, the department was obliged to write off the expenditure on our side. From a disciplinary process, the staff member and specifically was in the CSC will go through a consequence management process, but that will happen within .B specifically. With regard to, and just to state the disciplinary actually occurred in this year. With regard to page 242 on the movable assets written off, so the assets in terms of the three major assets, the camera and the two laptops, at this stage it's been written off on the asset register, but it then moves into a loss control process. So we will then investigate, look at where was it negligence, was it theft, and then based on our loss control process, we would hold the official accountable if it was negligence, theft, etc. Then with regard to the recoverable revenue for GG vehicles, in terms of, I think I missed that one, the recoverable revenue as it relates to GG vehicles is where these damages to a GG vehicle, and in that case, we would institute, if the official is found to be negligent, then there would be a process instituted where we would recover the damages to those vehicles. In the one instance that relates to we've completed the process and we're now recovering. And the second process where there's more vehicles is where we've just identified, or government vehicle has just identified the number of possible GG vehicle losses, cases, damages, and we haven't gone through the process of recoverable revenue as yet. Actually, I think that is all my questions.
Thank you. So we'll circle back and then we'll do page 228 on the Pick n Pay question, and then I'll ask Rashid to answer the question.
Thanks, HOD. I'll just answer the one question on underspending on page 200 from member Kleho. It was the one issue is a result of it's just 188,000. It's because there were delays in the finalization of the appointment of the new director. So that is related to the fact that we don't always pay acting allowances, which means you have unspent COE money, and sometimes that can mean because just takes 3 to 6 months sometimes for that job to be appointed. The other one was underspending on the We Mean Business campaign, and that was just simply it was a set of money we set aside to promote the province, and again it happened during a time when we didn't get to run those full campaigns, so we didn't spend it. The second one on the Pick n Pay, I think on page 228 it explains it. It actually this occurred, Chairperson. It occurred actually in the 2018-2019 year, but you must remember that when opening a Pick n Pay store costs a lot more than the small component that we provide. So we provide almost 10% of the costs of opening that Pick n Pay. We were just a small player in that. So our 300K wouldn't pay for the full establishment of this supermarket or spaza shop. So our component there is that we were one of the partners along with other funders. And there's a very clear explanation here where this particular person in Delft agreed to open the Pick n Pay store and then fell ill, and hence they had to repay the money because they didn't go through with opening the store. But as a principle, we were just partners to this Pick n Pay revitalization project. It wasn't something that was initiated by us per se. We have several other projects where we fund people directly, as you know, through the Booster Fund on a large scale. But this program was one where we were simply in partnership with Pick n Pay. So, thank you. John, the township revitalization one, if you want to answer.
Yeah, the township revitalization one is good and there's a bad to it. We did a program with the Oudtshoorn municipality. We helped small black businesses, and there was 4 businesses I recall. One was a guy that was making belts from ostrich skin, and that was a success because we provided him with machinery and equipment to do all the fancy work, and his business went on. And then the 2 ladies that we financed, they were clothing manufacturers, and what we did was we paid them a transfer to purchase equipment. Fancy overlockers, because they could make not only tracksuits, they could make embroidery and all that stuff. And the deal was that they would place an order for the equipment, which they failed to do. We then followed up, and we sit in a situation now where the sheriff of the court is looking for the one, and the other one has agreed to pay back, and that's the amounts there, 77 and 46. Also happy to report that the one specific cooperative that we helped in that program was that 4 guys that put together a co-op with for breeding of or rearing of ostriches. And when we assisted them, they were just rearing the ostriches from a certain size. They're now in a situation where they actually breed their own chicks. So that was a success of that part of the project. So that's the sweet part of it.
I think we've covered a bit. We need to go to Wesgro. Yeah, okay. And Atlantis.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to start on page 128. What is covered there is the amount of 124,000 is for an acting allowance for an acting CEO when the former CEO left. The second amount of 217,000 is for an acting allowance when the former chief marketing officer left. So that happened in June 21. So those are acting allowances. On page 129, the increase in 2 million in relation to consulting fees relates to the Cape Trade portal. I think the committee may be aware that we've digitized the export promotion platform so that more exporters are able to get access to the platform. And that, of course, digitization, I think on this occasion, costed an increase in money. On page 130, the first amount is for board fees. And obviously that's probably an increase either in the number of board members. I can't be specific, but that's for board fees. And then the amount of 7.1 million, that is the surrender back to DDAT. So that's obviously the underspend amount. In relation to, so that is page 131, and then the last one for me is on page 135. So page 135 relates to irregular expenditure. And there are 3 underlying issues. So I've just had a look at the list of the transactions, and I've got the acting CFO that can also help to add if it's necessary, but there are 3 underlying issues. The one is in relation to the SPD1 and SPD4 forms that have to be completed in relation to SARS and what is the other one? SARS and the declarations, yeah. So we have already sent a request for an exemption to the Provincial Treasury. The Provincial Treasury has now forwarded that to the National Treasury, and in fact we have a case, somebody working on the matter to consider whether they would give us an exemption in relation to SPD1 and SPD4. So so that's the one underlying matter. The second underlying matter relates to the RFQ and the evaluation criteria being defined up front in the process. We have already adjusted the process. So we've already changed the process to be compliant. So that matter has been addressed. And then obviously there were some deviations that the Auditor General deemed were not viable. So those are just the underlying issues. I would like to say that we are investigating the full population so that we can quantify the extent to which this issue has already, the extent of the issue. And then also, as I indicated earlier, we have completed a full supply chain policy review. We've reworked the SOP processes. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we won't, obviously we'll still see this irregular expenditure, but I'm hoping that it won't be perpetuated for much longer into the future. I'm just going to ask Alroy if he would like to add anything to that. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Alroy, Acting CFO of Wesgro. I just want to add on the SBD1, SBD4 issue. The CEO has indicated that we've applied for exemption. The reason for the application for exemption is not because Wesgro does not want to comply with what needs to be complied with, but the underlying issue is that it deals with foreign suppliers, and we do have an issue with foreign suppliers wanting to or being willing to complete those forms for us. So the application to the Treasury is that in cases where we do have issues with foreign suppliers being advised by their legal teams not to complete these forms, that we would have that in place and that it would not result in irregular expenditure. Just for context around that. Thank you, Chair.
Then we had the question on maths for Saldana
Is it Wesgro?
IDZ.
Wesgro finish?
Yes.
Is Wesgro finish? Okay.
Yes.
The war room, that is a line item on your thing. What is it? Page 141. We don't want the war starting under.
So the Wesgro war room had continued. The war room had continued at Wesgro as a project for a short while. The project is no longer considered to be a priority, and as a result, that project had reached its end and completion, and subsequently the money had to be returned.
No, I think the question is, what is a war room?
Oh, apologies. There were so many questions we didn't know. So the war room is a project where we apply the PDIA methodology. That's the like an iterative approach to problem solving. And the war room at the time that it was constituted about 2 years ago was intended to solve very complex government problems. And you know, oftentimes they would evolve around a particular theme. And the methodology was intended to help us in government to really sit and mull over this problem and really figure it out, rather than directing a project at something and we're going to have these deliverables and these targets, and then we didn't really understand the problem. So the project initially had about 6 themes, and this over time had ebbed and flowed as we came to understand that sometimes the problem had a very simple solution when we really understood the problem, and in other cases it had more complex solutions. So I think we dealt quite effectively with a multitude of these thematic problems, and therefore, well, I can't really. So some of the examples are are from like building plan approvals and, you know, things like that. And sometimes we just needed a basic solution when we all just sat around the room and really began to understand the problem. So some of the problems were more extensive, also around the construction industry, and the team had also began to understand what they needed. And I think one of the good outcomes of that is that it allowed a lot of the different departments and entities to better understand what they needed to do. And as a result of that, a lot of those actions that we received as a report back from the war room had been fairly successful in resolving some of those matters.
Well, thanks. So at least it was not preparation for a war. You're not preparing for a war. Okay. Next, Saldana in Atlantis. Okay.
Thank you, honourable members. So yeah, so the value for money and the impact of the program is a very good question. In the program over the 2020-2021 calendar years, because it was the first one that we had rolled out and really testing the pilot with the Department of Education. So it was to retain the teachers throughout the program, which is not as easy as one would think when COVID was happening and schools needed to go online and teachers did not necessarily have the resources and everything was in a bit of a flux. So I think I stand to be corrected, but I do believe that at the beginning 18 teachers enrolled and 14 then graduated. And the reasons for the reduced numbers is largely because some of the teachers had moved were moved into other subjects or other schools that were out of the bounds of the catchment area, if I can call it that. So they weren't in the West Coast district anymore. Over time, I mean, the aim of the high school program is to increase the mathematics pass rates and the quality of the mathematics pass rates, as well as we have another curriculum that we would like to roll out, which is in the sciences and then in life orientation, specifically speaking to those social dynamic skills and leadership skills that are quite important for youth to be capacitated in. We haven't come to formal targets yet with the Department of Education. I will state that on record. We're focusing now on the teachers on equipping the teachers with the confidence and the skills to then implement. We're taking a very cautious approach. It is education. It is basic education. So it is quite a sensitive area. The Department of Education is conservative. Thanks.
Atlantis?
Atlantis, yes.
Thank you. So the questions on the general expenditure on page 115. First question around the community stakeholder network. So that's a particular forum that we set with the community, which is constituted by the different sectors. It's a voluntary organization. We have an agreement with the stakeholder network where we do fund stipend payments towards their data, their cell phone costs and travel, so that they can meet with us regularly and we can get inputs on activities that we need to target towards the community. We also spend some funding in capacitating the members on that forum, as well as a particular facilitator that assists us with that relationship with the community stakeholder network. On the community skills development, so that's some of the costs that we incurred in relation to the skills development programs that we run under what we refer to as our integrated ecosystem management programs, which consists of the skills development, enterprise development, and community initiatives that we run. On the consulting and professional fees, so that's mostly made up of those strategies that we were establishing in relation to our water, energy, waste, and zone operational management. So it was really getting to strategies that we could implement for the zone management in terms of our greening of the park. On the supply development program, so there's a lot of context around the particular programs that we run under pages 41 of the annual report, giving a clear indication of some of the programs that we've run for the past financial year. The crux of that money was spent on a 6-month construction SMME supply development program that we ran with the community, as well as some of the other training initiatives that we've done. Thank you.
Follow-up?
It's more of a comment, Chair, just because of it's been a long day for you. We'll just put in the resolution to engage.
I only started this afternoon. So
we will engage with the entity to just have an understanding, because I looked at the Saldana IDZ versus the Atlantis on the issue of the community skills development, the community stakeholder network. So the Saldana, they do the whole approach of the other skills development and other things under one umbrella. Now I want to have an understanding in Atlantis if you separate it, because community is part of your stakeholders. So if you separate it, what is the rationale behind? But it's not for today. It will be something that maybe as we engage for the cost attached to that, maybe it will make sense to us as members to have an understanding of the different approach to the operations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Honorable Minister.
These concluding remarks. Or...
Yes.
I don't think we'd ever get here.
I think the honorable members have exhausted their questions. So,
exhausted being the operative word here. Thank you very much, Chair, to you and the committee for the robust questions. We're very grateful for the oversight work that this committee does, and we're very grateful to be here to be able to respond. I also would like to thank all the teams across the entities and the department for the hard work that was put into the year under review. And with that, HOD, I don't know if you want to some final words.
Well, thank you very much for the experience, being the first one. I really appreciate the engagement and the interest in the citizen. I think it's quite visible. So we really appreciate the work that you do. Thank you.
Then thank you very much, Minister and your department, as well as the HOD, and to the rest of the officials that have attended. And of course, you might have maybe observed us, or maybe we might have come up as if we were trying to be very difficult. We're not really difficult people, but we are also not easy people either. So please bear with us. But on a more serious note, let me make use of this opportunity to thank you. Ours actually is to try and make sure that the standard that has been set, we continue with that and even increase on it. So obviously, in so doing, it's not gonna be an easy effort, as well. This whole accountability ecosystem, you are actually part of that, and this is part of us actually including you in that accountability ecosystem. And obviously, we are doing this with our partners in the form of the audit committee as well as the auditor general. So we are also, I'm always saying to department, when we ask questions, we are not asking questions to catch you up, but we are actually asking questions so that we can actually deliver on our mandate to hold you and the executive accountable. And we actually expect cooperation as well. We are doing it in a very cooperative manner, but obviously there will be, as we might notice in this department, it's supposed to be driving actually the economic strategy of the province, and you've got all the entities that can actually do that. But also, when you might have noticed also that we have, it's one of the department where there has been a regress. So if there's been a regress, obviously our interaction with you is gonna be different to other departments that have actually are not regressing. Is not because we are trying to be difficult, but we want you also to go back to the same level that we are actually at. And then we are confident that with the information that we've got from the AG and from the audit committee and from yourself as well and the entity, that we'll be able to go back to where the department, especially Wesgro, was. Let me make use of this opportunity to thank the audit committee, the auditor general as well. They are very helpful in this drive, and also the department led by you, Minister. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, HOD. You can be released as we are going to be continuing with our business as the committee. Thank you very much. See this delegation is delegation. AG? AG? No, they can be released. The AG. AG? 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 I can. So, so we don't do resolution now?
Yeah.
We prefer.
We
You
can
prefer?
email, and then when we come, then they will be already there, and then we adopt. Yeah.
Those people who've got ideas, we do that via email.
Yeah.
Okay, are you? No, man, let's get done with it. Otherwise, we are going to set another trend now, which might catch up with us down the train. We won't be long. It will be here.
Chair,
Another 5,
democracy
10.
is not there in scope. I'm just mentioning majority and versus minority. But anyway, let's continue, Chair.
So now, tell me now, what are the issues? I think one area, obviously, we took us long. I must say we did well in spite of all these many departments. Imagine if we're going to deal with them one by one, we will have still be, or will not even be halfway through. But I think one thing that stands out is really the Wesgro issue, really, as to how we are going to deal with that. Obviously, we know that we are going to say they must come back with a plan, how they are going to resolve the issues. So the issues of the assurance as well, they must address those issues, and obviously when they come back to us, they must come back with a complete plan as to how they are going to deal with the issue of that they have regressed, so that they can go back to their former glory that they used to have, because it was this thing of them has been coming on for 2-3 years basically, and then it seemed not to be improving. But they say there's new leadership, there's a new chairperson, there's CEO, and there's even the new board as well. So let's hope that is the beginning. But then we'd like them to come back and tell us, but we'll write to them and say, look, give us a recovery plan. How are you going to recover from this situation that you are in? Is there any other resolution, Honorable Member?
Chair, if in that assurance we can get, because they talked about the policy review.
Yes.
And they talked about the consequence management.
Yes.
They talked about the necessary controls that they are going to implement for their financial management performance. So if we can get details, and maybe adding another one of the Atlantis, because now they just got introduced to the GREP. Also, if we can engage with them so that they don't end up in regressing because of not getting their thumb in the right, pressing the right buttons. If we engage with them, then they will come with how are they going to now migrate to be stable within the new systems that they have to implement. And also when we call the Wesgro, if we can also call DDIT, because they are the big brother, and to have an understanding of, like Member Nkondlo was talking about the how they should be doing an oversight to that, to have an understanding of now to what an extent now after they've seen their entity regressing in their financial performance oversight role, how are they going to go about it? Then we get the framework of now moving forward, Wesgro be having the DDAT as the big brother, how are they going to implement the systems not to have this again in front of us?
Any other views, Honorable Ngol?
just think in the next annual report, or even next year in the new financial year, because if we consider majority from the department to almost all these entities, maybe minus Saldana, you've got new leadership with new ideas, reorientating the organization. So I think it's going to be very interesting to sort of watch the developments. And I think one is just picking up a very good energy from all of them in terms of how they would want to sort of improve on whatever weaknesses that they would have found, which I think is the good thing about new people. When they come into an institution, they have got fresh eyes and fresh ideas. So I think also, Chair, I would have thought that maybe, I'm not sure whether this committee or maybe you maybe it can't be this committee. I was gonna say we do a letter to the former chair of the Atlantis SEZ. Yeah, I think it's our committee. It's just that our resolutions are still coming. I think for the great work he did in the setup phase of the Atlantic SEZ. I think, Chair, yeah, that one is our committee. Sorry to belabor this one.
Yeah, no, I can understand. You've been here the whole day.
Chair, the last one, it will be the audit committee, because this thing of the report has been coming on for a very long time. We have to, we experienced the same thing with the gambling board before that it was. So
they must come back with the incoming chairperson.
They must come back with the incoming, and then we need to get that relationship working, because they are our partners. And so after we take it from there, also the stability within the Wesgro also will be there, because they are another facet that is causing instability there. So we need that engagement to have an understanding where do they feature in within the Wesgro, and also the expectations from us. What do we want to see, and how do they contribute to stabilize Wesgro as the audit committee?
Honorable Van der Westhuizen.
With all of that, can I just say, I wonder if we shouldn't just, under the resolutions, also acknowledge the fact that the department and some of the entities have received unqualified audit with no findings.
Always a note and an acknowledgement. Always do that.
Perhaps we can start with that, with the positive, and then come with the action steps.
That's a preamble. That will be the preamble. We note and acknowledge. Honorable Murray.
Yeah, I move that we adopt.
Good. Okay, thank you very
Chair,
much.
I second.
Thank you very much, honorable members. The leadership, the eldership. No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, honorable members. I know it's been a very long day. At least we haven't hit 6 o'clock yet. We are just before 6 o'clock. Let me thank you very much for your tenacity and for your resilience as well. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned. Hey, but this delegation.